So when it was first mentioned to me that I may have PTSD, I thought, well, I've never been in the army. It just didn't really make any sense. To me, it was something that you just associated with these poor soldiers under fire and hear a helicopter and jump under tables and things. But as the therapist explained to me when I was being treated, that it's something that tens of thousands of people go undiagnosed with. So I just wanted to share my symptoms just to see if somebody else can actually align with them. So back in 1998, I had a diving incident where I just couldn't breathe. I managed to get myself out of it, but it took me about an hour to get back to the surface, which was terribly stressful. Got back on board the boat, absolutely cried my eyes out, but felt that was it. It was all over and done with. 2 weeks later, I was back diving again, no problems at all. People around me had realised that I had changed, but I didn't myself and just carried on merrily because I suppose people just didn't want to comment on that fact. While I was being treated for it, the therapist did say to me that tens of thousands of people suffer with post-traumatic stress disorder without knowing it. So all I wanted to do was recant how I felt at the time, and maybe people that are watching this can actually identify and seek a different form of help, as opposed to I was diagnosed as being with depression and it did nothing for me because it was completely different. So what I found in day-to-day life is that with having PTSD, that if I got myself into a stressful situation, it could be something quite minor. Maybe I've dropped something and broken it. That level of anxiety could go out of proportion to how I felt. And I always felt this was really strange. I felt like I was always overreacting to things. Even worse would be as if I was watching television and I was watching a movie, because I'd been in a near drowning situation. If anybody was underwater holding their breath or somebody was being suffocated, I physically felt that I couldn't breathe. And I would get very overwhelmed and like a panic attack just by watching this thing on television, and it didn't make any sense to me. As the therapist explained to me that when we form everyday memories, they're about this size. So let's say we go shopping. We form a memory this size. We're going to go and play golf tomorrow. We form a memory this size. When we have a traumatic or a life-threatening incident, the memory is this size. It doesn't just record it as a simple fact. It records all five senses. You can remember how it smelt, how you felt, what you saw, almost what you tasted. It's very visceral. So then what happens is the mind records that, but it stores it. You have no idea that that's what it's done. So when you come across another traumatic experience, the mind, it's part of your fight or flight system, will go back and it will say, okay, I'm feeling anxiety, is it this? And rather than picking up on our little experiences that are this size, it goes back to this big one. But it takes you back there physically. You can't see it. You've got no idea that the brain is there, but you feel the same way. You feel the stress, the fear, the anxiety, the guilt, all of the negative emotions. So when something stressful has happened in the future, that's exactly how you feel, but you have got no idea why you feel that way. It's because your brain has gone back there to think, oh, is it this? But it's not. How it would manifest itself with me is because I was in an environment where I was unable to breathe, which is obviously relatively stressful. If I'm watching a movie, television, or even somebody in real life that is unable to breathe, let's say they're being suffocated or they're underwater, I physically would not be able to breathe. Not psychosomatic, I would be struggling to breathe because my mind has gone back to that memory. I've got no idea that's where it is, but my mind has said, is it here? And it takes me back there. And I would have a full-on panic attack. And I would think this is a symptom of my depression that I'd caught. But it wasn't. All it was just my own survival mechanisms trying to identify why I felt this way. Do I need to run away or do I need to fight? So the way that I was treated, and I was so fortunate because it's not a lot of therapists used what's called EMDR, which stands for eye movement, desensitization and reprocessing. So basically what they do is they get you back you feel like a fool, and you can't, certainly I couldn't help but laugh, because they get you into that certain space, so you're in the memory, and then they ask you to follow their fingers with your eyes, and it's funny. But as she was doing this to me, she'd say, "How do you feel?" I physically felt a warmth washing over my head, and she'd say, "How do you feel?" And I remember categorically, I said, "Well, I feel ecstatic." Then she'd do it again. She said, "How would you feel?" And I said, "I feel like I'm going to burst into tears." And all of these different emotions. But all she was doing is, she explained it, she was taking this huge memory and just depowering it and just bringing it down to a normal memory. Whereas before, with my diving incident, I couldn't talk about it. I would have a breakdown. It'd get to a point. Now I can just see it as a normal memory, and I can just talk it through. That only took 4 sessions. The first one was talking with the therapist just about what had happened. She explained what was going to happen. The second one, she reinforced a positive memory. So rather than having this big negative memory, well, I also had a big positive memory. So if I thought of the positive one, it could override the negative one. And then the second 2, she shrunk down the initial out of air system. And then the second one, it was the whole hour getting back up to the surface. And I remember walking to the car after the second treatment session, starting the ar, turning the car off, and all I had was silence. Before, it always felt like I had, let's say, 10 television sets on in my head with the sound right up, and everything was whizzing around, and all of a sudden it was just silence, and I actually stopped and listened, and there was nothing. And it was the most, so I'm getting a bit tearful now, it was the calmest I've ever been in my entire life. Something that I'd lived with for so long was gone. And it was just amazing. So to me, I believe if you feel that you've had something very traumatic happened in your life, if you're a normal person, it's going to create these big memories, but they are so easy to be disempowered and just made to be a normal one. So I would encourage anybody, but please find a therapist that specializes in EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, because it works.